everybody, and welcome along to Watercolour Wednesday. There we go. Hi everyone, welcome along. Oh, lots of you joining live today, and lots of new members to say hello to as well. Let me just make sure my microphone is working. Yes, everything seems to be in order for once. You know how forgetful I can be. So, welcome along. Welcome to the new members. Some of them today. Melissa Buckle, Sheena Ford, Samilla, Henny, Caldine. Welcome along, guys, and loads more. It's wonderful to have you in our happy group. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you pop across to my Facebook page dedicated to Watercolour Wednesday painters. Just go to my Facebook page, Eunice Friend Artist and Gallery, click the group, or check your email that you sent when you joined, and there'll be a link there for you to go straight across to Facebook group and join. It'd be great to have you along there too. Okay, so we are doing a Christmas lantern, still on the Christmas themes. I kind of wish we'd save this one for a Christmas card, but there we go. I found this photo. I was looking for something else actually, and I found this, and I thought this would be a good one for you guys to do. Lots of techniques going to be involved in this one today. Okay, so either just watch and paint later, or try and paint along as we go. It's probably going to go to an hour and a half today. Oh, but sorry guys, there's someone at my door.
I don't know, I have like 20.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, I ordered it as 20 and they've done it all individually. Very. Yeah, exactly. Separate.
Yes.
Lots of card.
I don't think it's 14 or something.
No! Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Typical Wednesday interruption. So the most bizarre things happened today. I ordered some products for my show coming up on Create and Craft. I ordered 20 of these items, and instead of sending one box of 20, they've literally sent 20 individual packets. Amazon for you. Who knows? Who knows what went on? So, interruption over. Let's get started. I'm just going to make myself disappear from the screen. There we go. So we can just focus on the job at hand, which is this one. And I can see your chat. So if you're a member of YouTube, you're able to chat as well. So as I was saying before I was interrupted, we're going to be using quite a few techniques today. We're going to be using bokeh in the background. We're going to be using salt, so make sure you grab yourself some table salt, or you could use rock salt. I've only got table salt in the studio, but rock salt's great as well. You'll get a different effect. Yeah, so let's get started. Phew, I'm out of breath. So I've sketched out the lantern and a few of the plants on my paper. I did put instructions that you should sketch out ahead of this class. And if you wanted to, you could outline this with your fine line ink pen as well, if that's the kind of look you're going for. And we'll just be using my primary colours, so just a reminder, especially for those of you that are new, Hansa yellow or lemon yellow, phthalo blue, you could use Prussian blue or ultramarine blue, and quinacridone magenta. Any kind of pinky red will be fine, a crimson will be fine. And then I'm going to use some burnt sienna and Friends grey or Payne's grey. If you don't have the grey, all you do is mix all three primaries together, make a purple, a bluey purple first, more blue than red, and then add a little bit of yellow and you'll get your grey. And for burnt sienna, if you don't have burnt sienna, you'll add your quinacridone magenta and your yellow to make a reddy orange, and then a tiny bit of blue, just a tiny smidgen of blue, and you can create your own burnt sienna and friends grey. So that's brush wise, I'm going to be using my size 12 round brush and my size 6 round brush, and I've also got my rigger. This is a rigger brush. You can see it's longer and thinner than the others, and that's really useful to have in your collection for doing things like leaves, trees, branches, that kind of thing. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is mix up my background colour. Now I want a blue, but I want it a bit more grey blue. I don't want it bright blue. Oh, I've got a new palette, by the way. This is by Meaden. £21 it cost me. I really love it. Look at that chunk. It gives me a lot more mixing space, so hopefully I won't have to keep cleaning my palette. So I'm going in with some water. I'm going to pick up a slug of my blue. Now these colours that I'm using are my handmade paints. I'm currently out of stock of the primaries, but they will be coming in stock again in about a week's time. They're pure pigment, ultra high colour. So I've got my blue in there, and I want to tone it down a little bit, make it a bit grey. Hi Claudine, lovely to have you along. I'm going to add a little bit of my burnt sienna into the blue, and that will just knock it back a little bit and take it more grey. Do it a little bit at a time. Remember, if you haven't got burnt sienna, just add a little bit of your red and yellow at a time, tiny bit at a time. There we go, that's a nice grey. Just want to knock it down a little bit. Or you could use your Payne's grey as well if you want. Payne's grey is a nice background colour. I'm now going to mix these all together. Yay! Let's have some fun. So options for your background. Making quite a bit in my puddle. I don't want to run out. Lovely. And it's good to do some of the colour mixing up front so that you're not getting stressed once we start painting. And now I want some of this glow for inside the lantern. So I need an orangey colour. So obviously orange will take some of the magenta or whatever red you're using. And yellow. We get a lovely orange. Make sure you wash your brush out in between picking up more paint, and you don't need to use tube paints. Tube paints and pan paints are the same thing. One's just been left to the air to go hard. That's all the difference is. A bit more yellow, I want that quite bright. And then I'm going to do a pinky bit at one end. So I'm adding a little bit more of that red in. So I've got a darker orange and a light orange all going on here. Lovely. I think that's all we need to get started. So we're going to work on the background first. Hi Alex, lovely to have you along, my darling. And we are going to work wet into wet. We're not going to worry too much about the greenery. Well, I'm going to start down the bottom here, and I'm going to come around the baubles and around the edge of the lantern with just clean water. Okay, so we're pre-wetting. I've got a little bit of dirty water on my brush so you can see where I'm going. And we're just going to come around. As I say, don't worry about the branches. And we're just going to wet the paper. You want it to have a nice shine to it, but not puddles. Now there is on my Facebook page, a good reason for joining the Facebook page is I have a tutorial on there for how to prepare your paper. You'll notice that my paper is taped down to a board. I've got this brown gum tape around it, and then I've got some masking tape giving me some borders. And what I've done is I've stretched my paper, so I've soaked it in a bucket or a sink of water for about 10 minutes, and then when it's thoroughly wet, I've placed it on my wooden board and used the gum tape, the brown tape, to stick it down, and then leave it overnight for it to flatten. Okay, what happens is the paper soaks up all the water and then it goes tight and you've got it taped to the board, and this is going to prevent the paper buckling in future. Okay, we're going to kind of work backwards here. Normally, when we're doing a wash like this, we're doing a sky and we start dark and come lighter. But this time we're going to take our grey blue down the bottom. I'm just going to tap it in, using the tip of my brush to go around the edge of the lantern. And then I just want I want some gaps. I've wet the paper, so this grey blue, I'm just dancing my brush around. The only places I'm being careful are around the bauble at the bottom, around the pine cone, and then I'm just going to have fun letting that brush dance around, but not covering everything. I'm leaving gaps of paper in between my mark making. Let's come the other side. Use the tip of the brush to go around the edge of the lantern and your pine cone. Okay, so I've got a darker, stronger colour towards the bottom. And then as we go up the page, I'm going to use less paint on my brush and just dance it around, really just scratching it around into the paper. I'm going to have a bit of a greeny tint to mine because I didn't clean my brush out properly, but never mind. So I'm putting a little bit of paint down and then just bouncing around, getting this mottled look. And what's going to happen, because we've wet the paper, we're going to have a lovely wash, soft wash in our background. I want a little bit more colour over this side just to balance it out. And just let that paint nice and fluid. You don't want your mixture too strong. You want it like a weak tea. So not too much pigment. And we're just going to pop that on there to give us that lovely background. Okay. Now I'm going to take my clean brush with just water on. I'm going to hold my brush horizontal to the painting, and I'm going to do a couple of little taps of water over the top of my painting. Another technique. We're going to create some natural blooms happening in that background wash. What's going to happen where the water lands, it's going to push the colour apart and it's going to create these little circles of light. A few more. Just clean water. It's just the magic of clean water. Tapping that over the top of your wash. Just fading some of that out a little bit. It's a bit stronger than I wanted. Doesn't that look lovely already? It looks lovely. I'm going to pause every now and again just to give you a chance, because I know you're trying to listen and paint if you're painting live. So I'll just pause every now and just tidying up my edges. There we go. The reason I'm not worried about the foliage is because that's going to be a nice dark colour and that's going to stand out over our background. So that's why I've not worried about where the ferns are going to be placed. If you feel you've gone a bit too dark, what you can do is lift some colour out. I'm going to do that here. So by the lid, I think I've gone a bit too dark, so I'm going to take a clean damp brush and just run it over the paper, or you can take some tissue paper and just lift a bit of that colour back out again. So your brush is a great tool for putting colour on and lifting off. Okay, we're going to come down the bottom. I put a bit of tape here at the bottom of mine because I don't want to come too far down. And we're going to do the same thing again. Clean water first, and we're going to come up underneath, going over the top of any of the foliage and up to the bottom of our lantern. And I want you to go around the edge of the baubles and around the edge of the pine cones. Just clean water for the snow. I'm going to move my tape down a bit, I think. I'm just going to move this down a bit. I've been a bit mean with the foregrounds. There we go. A bit more water there. Then we're going to do the same thing again, using the same colour, the puddle that we made, the grey-blue. And this time I'm just going to bounce along the edge, creating a random pattern of icy cold colour into the snow, along the bottom of my paper. What's going to happen, because we pre-wet the paper, that's going to bleed up and soften into the white areas, and then here and there I'm going to add a bit of shadow under the pine cone. I'm going to same colour again, just with the tip of my brush. I'm just going to come in there under the bauble and just pop a little bit of shadow colour, let it do its thing and bleed out into the water. Don't try and control it too much. And just a random couple of areas of texture. So it looks like the snow's just landed and we've got heaps. Not too much. I don't want to lose the white of the paper here. I want to keep that mainly white with the blues and the grey coming from the bottom. Now it's starting to dry, I'm going to come along again with just the very tip of my brush and in a couple of spots, just literally tapping a bit more pigment along that edge, make it a bit stronger. Do excuse me, those of you that are new won't know that I've had a terrible cold for the last 2 weeks to this day, and I'm just getting over, still just getting over it, so bear with me if I cough and sneeze every now and again. I'll try not to. Okay, we're going to go and have some fun in the middle next. Nice clean brush. Oops. Just grabbing another brush out of my pot. And we're going to go wet onto wet again. Now the important thing with watercolour is that we don't try and paint a bauble whilst the background's still wet. We need to come away from the wet edge areas and we're going to come in to the glass of our lantern with water. Now you can see through the glass the bands that are holding the panes of glass together. I'm going to come down. The only bit I want you to leave dry is the candle top. So this this ellipse and the flame. Don't put water on the flame and don't put water in the top of the candle. Everywhere else in the glass, A nice even, be careful around your pine cone. And it doesn't matter if the colour that we're going to put in here bleeds if you go over the edge. It really doesn't matter, because the lantern's going to be dark, so we can cover our sins up. Okay, then I'm going to go into, I'm going to change my mind here. I'm going to take my yellow on its own, quite weak, quite watery, and I'm going to come and just touch around the candle, around the flame, getting this lovely glow, just the yellow on its own to start with. I'm going to bring that across into the other panes of glass, either side. So we've got this bright band across the middle, except for the flame, which is white, and except for the top of the candle, remember. Okay, I'm just going to zoom the camera in a little bit. So we're working wet into wet again. There we go. You can see a bit better now. Now we're going to go into our orangey, our yellow with a little bit of magenta in it, and I'm going to come right next to and touch into that yellow and going up the glass with a slightly stronger yellow, more orangey yellow. I'm going to bring that onto the candle holder. Onto the floor inside the lantern and in between our pine cone. I can feel the heat of this candle already. I've changed my mind about what I've done here. I'm allowed to do that. I do that quite often. I'm going to carry on with this orangey yellow right to the top of the glass. And we're just going to have some fun with this wet in wet technique. So the whole of the glass is now yellow and yellowy orange. Now I'm going to get some magenta on its own with water. Water it down, you don't want it too strong. So really like tea consistency or cordial. And I'm just going to touch in with the very tip of my brush, magenta over the top of the yellow. And just let it mix on its own. I'm going to add some down the bottom as well. So we're leaving this band of warm yellow, the heat, in the middle. I'm going to add some on the floor. And to the candle holder. And just allow those colours, look how they blend so beautifully. Your decision is how much pink to add and how low you want to go with the pink. I'm going to bring it a little bit lower. Just dancing around with the very tip of my brush, deciding how low I want that pink to go. A bit more pink at the top. Just tapping it in. If you want a stronger colour, don't brush it, tap and lift the brush. Create these tiny beads of colour, wet into wet, and let them do the work for you. I'm going to try something now. Now this is an experiment because I've not painted this before either. We're all new to this painting together. I'm just going to test something. Bear with me. I'm just popping a little bit of blue to see if I'm going to get the nice kind of lavender colour. Because there's yellow down already, be careful because it could go brown. I've just added a little bit of blue amongst that magenta. I'm going to go back to the magenta again. Just playing. Remember, for strong colour, it's not necessarily about how much paint you've got in your puddle, but about how you apply it. Just tapping it down, creating those little beads of colour, wet into wet, and let them do the work for you. Isn't that wonderful? I love it already. Okay. I'm easily pleased. Just tidying up the top of the candle. But really doesn't matter if you go over the lines on the lantern itself. Have fun with that for a moment. Get that perfected. A lot of people think when they're doing candlelight that they need to use yellow for the candlelight, but it's actually the brightness of the white paper that gives you that look of the heat and the real brightness of the light. Now, for those of you that are being really picky, there is a starburst in there. If you want to do a starburst, of course, you can try and lift that out afterwards. Or another alternative is to put masking fluid in ahead. I think that's a little bit cheesy, so I've left the starburst out. I'm just going to leave you to finish that bit off whilst I just go and refill my coffee. And then we're going to go on to some more lifting out techniques, bokeh. Sorry guys, I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, I'm on my way back. Now, the good reason to have a coffee break at that moment is to allow our background to dry so we can move on to the bokeh effect. Paula, it might have just been because I was making a cup of coffee, possibly. You shouldn't do, because I've got my mic on. We'll see if it improves. Okay, so with my small size 6 brush and a piece of tissue, I'm going to go into the background, and what I want to do is get these soft circles of light in our background. You may have thought when I painted that background I'd gone quite dark, so I'm just going to run my brush around a circle and touch down with the tissue. Do that a couple of times, reactivating the paint, touch down with your tissue. Circle and lifting out. Just reactivate that paint and you'll get to lift these little circles of light. I'll do it on the darker area. There is a whole section in the classes where we did a painting using bokeh techniques. And then if you want to, when that's dry, you can go round the edges of those circles more with your darker background colour to enhance them. Don't do it whilst it's wet though, it will bleed in. I'm going to do another one here. Reactivate the paint, lift off, there we go. Reactivate the paint and lift off. So you get these soft little circles in the background. Let's do one a bit higher up. Lift off. It's really a lovely soft illusion of diffused light. It's crackling while I'm talking. Might be my necklace. Let me take the necklace off, then reposition the microphone. Let me know if that gets better, Paula. Everything's plugged in as it should be, so I'm not sure why, unless you're picking up the sound of my laptop whirring. Okay, now all this is dry. We're going to go in, I'm just deciding what to do next. I'm going to let that background dry again. We're going to go into the Christmas bauble. This time we're going to paint wet onto dry. I'm going to take my magenta and I'm going to turn it into a red. And I do that by adding a smidgen of yellow. And magenta, red is not a primary colour, okay? Because you think of your printers at home. A little bit of yellow into your magenta and you get red. And I'm going to come around this bauble. I'm going to come around the edge. My size 12 brush, coming up onto the point, coming around either side and through the middle. Either side, through the middle, and then I'm trying to see what's going on in the photo. It's a bit hard to see. I think there's a bit of a shadow from the foliage, but I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to paint around the bottom. Oh good, it was my necklace. My necklace was bashing into the microphone. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, once I've put my red on, I'm coming with just a clean brush. Clean your brush, touch it on your tissue. Get rid of the excess water, and then I'm going to go into the white paper that's left around that bauble, and we're going to create our highlights with just water. And what's going to happen? It's going to pick up, the water's going to touch into the red that we've already put down. And it's going to spread lightly, but it's going to give us that three-dimensional look. I'm going to go back into my red. Of course, you can use a pre-mixed red if you want. And I'm just going to touch along that middle line some little puddles of water to make that colour stronger, building up the colour in the bauble. Let's go again with this one back here. I'm going to do the same thing. Take my red, mix with magenta and a tiny touch of yellow. Come around the contours of the ball, but not the top. Across the middle. Clean your brush. Clean water, tap on your tissue first. The reason you tap on your tissue is you don't want too much water to flood in. You want to control how much water comes down. And if it's too wet, it'll all bleed together. So we've done the same thing. My brush is just rolled away. There we go. And then I'm going to go in again, same as we did before. A bit stronger. And just drop along that middle line on the very tip of my brush some stronger red. Excuse me, I just got a really strong tickle. And just nudge that paint where you want it to go. And then pop in that strong colour again across the middle. Giving you that three-dimensional shape. And keeping every line within your painting nice and soft. I'm just going to take that colour a little bit higher up. Just nudge it up with the tip of my brush. And because I've moved that paint, I need to replace it. So going back in across the middle with my stronger colour. And we have our little balls. Maybe a little bit higher up still. I can't make my mind up today. There we go. Taking a little bit higher up the colour. Remember, you can use your brush to scoop any up if you think you've gone too far. And I want that dark shadow again next to the pine cone. Isn't this a relaxing way to spend the day? Okay. And we've already created our shadows. If you want to, you could go back into that shadow. Just be careful because some of that might bleed into your ball. Okay. Where should we go next? We want to play with the salt in a moment. I'm just checking the background. That's nice and dry. Let's do some foliage. I'm going to keep you waiting for the lantern. So the next thing we're going to do is mix up some lovely strong greens. We didn't mix this earlier, we can mix it now. If you're finished with your background colour, you can use that. I'm going to take my blue into that grey colour that we mixed earlier. Wash that brush off cleanly before I pick up some yellow. I don't want too much yellow because I'm looking for a nice foresty green. Now that's a nice dark green. Let me just swatch that and show you. It's quite a nice sprucey green, but it's too bright. I want it a bit darker. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the third primary colour. And you'll notice that most of my lessons we focus on these colours to get you used to mixing colours and using a limited palette. I'm going to add a touch of red. So we've mixed blue and yellow to make our base green. And then if we want to neutralise it and tone it down, we'll add a bit of red in. And the red will take it darker. Look at that. I want a bit more. A little bit at a time. Another great green, if you've got grey, is to take your grey, Payne's grey or Friends grey, and add some yellow. You can get some really dark greens. There we go. Okay, so just keep going till you get the green you want. And I'm going to use my rigger brush for this. I'll also use... Just use the smallest. If you don't have a rigger brush, use the smallest brush you've got. Something like this, which is a size 6. Or you could go a size 2 or a size 1. And I want you to load that brush with water. Pick up the green. We're going to nice light touch, okay? We're going to come down along the middle of a branch of leaves. Down the middle. Stay nice and high on your brush. If you push on your brush and you push down, you'll get a fat line. Let me show you. If you push, you're going to get a fatter line because you're pushing hard on those bristles. If you come up onto the tip of brush, you get a nice thin line. So I want you to try and stay on the point of your brush. Just choose a couple of places for some leaves to come in. And we're just putting the spine in first. Have some coming out the other side of the lantern. The reference picture is just that. It's just a reference picture to give you ideas. And some here. Have some come in different directions. We're going to have some coming forward, in front of the lantern, on the ground there. So we're putting the spines in first. I'm just going to make a little bit of lighter green for a second. Some areas I want lighter, so I've just dragged a little bit of yellow in there. And we're going to come to the side of our centre line and just flick outwards. Touching onto the centre. And we're going to fill up our fern. Lift that brush at the end of the stroke. Lift and flick away, creating our grassy ferns. So I'm starting with this lighter. I've added some yellow, remember? Coming in and just flicking away. Try and mix up the shapes and the angles a little bit. A little, look how far that brush load goes. Just keep going. And overlap some of the leaves where they're touching. So this is my lighter green at the moment. Just relax into this. It's a fun process. Just starting in the middle of the leaf, the branch, the twig, and pulling out either side. Nice and easy. And the pine leaves are getting a bit shorter as we come up to the top of each one. Of course, your background needs to be dry at this stage. And now I've put that layer on, I'm going to go back into my dark green. Just one I missed there. Back into that dark green again. And I'm going to go over the top in places of these and create more texture, more dimensions, a bit more grey in there. There we go. Just make it creamier, darker, a bit more pigment. And then I'm going to go in again over the top. Nice wet brush. The paint flows off the brush. I'm just adding more rows of little ferns, they're not ferns, little pine leaves. Building up. Otherwise they look too skinny. So we put the lighter green on and then I'm coming back in just on the very tip of this brush. Look at this. Just building up texture and layers. Getting multiple shades of green, mixing, making some of these marks a bit shorter. Think of the pine itself. It's quite a dense little plant, and you've got some of the spikes coming towards you. So I'm making little shorter marks with this darker green along that spine to indicate shorter, denser pine doodahs. What would you call them? They're not leaves as such. I guess they are leaves. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. We're going to come on to the pine cones next. And for the pine cones, I want to see some snow. Okay, I want some snow on those open pine cones. So we're going to mix another colour. I told you this was going to be a busy one today. So I'm just going to mush up this orange that I've got here. Bring these two colours together. We're not going to create any waste. And that's given us a lovely burnt sienna colour. I want to go dark. I want a dark brown. So I'm going to add some blue, a little bit at a time. Wow. Blue and burnt sienna will give you like a burnt umber, okay? So that's what we've created here, burnt umber. Nice and strong, so I'm going to add a bit more pigment in there. I want this strong, creamy. I want the paint to behave and to stay where I put it in the pine cones. Because what we're painting in the pine cones really is the middles. We're just going to come in to our line drawing on the tip of our brush, wet onto dry paper, coming onto the tip of my brush and looking at those little shapes in between the folds of the pine cone. Just look at those patterns, that crisscrossy, crazy paving pattern coming around each of the lugs, if you like, of the pine cone. Just like layers, little scalloped layers. And just coming up the edges, up the side there. Okay, we're going to leave that one. We're not finished with it yet. We're going to come the other side. Do the same again. Painting the shadows in between the parts of the pine cone. So coming under each lug with our shadow. With this lovely dark, you could use grey if you wanted for this, you could go darker still. Keep your eye on that reference picture and just look at the patterns that are forming to create the shape of the cone. So we've been painting in the negative. Now that looks okay, it gives us the shape of the pine cone, but I want to soften those marks. And to soften them, I'm going to dry this off. I'm going to grab my hairdryer, I'm going to dry that off, and then I'm going to bring a glaze over the top. So dry your pine cones off, here we go. I'm going to take a little bit of my orangey colour that we did in the middle with the yellow and the little bit of magenta, really watered down. And then I'm just going to touch that in to some of the pine cones where it's picking up a little bit of reflection from the lantern on the snow. Don't go everywhere, just give it a little dab here and there. Whoops. I reactivated the green from the plant there, and there we go. And I've just seen a bit of plant that I missed the spines off, so I'm just going to do that. Pop that in there. Okay, we're nearly up to the part where we're going to have some fun with some salt. Okay, whilst we've got this brown mixture, I'm going to add a bit more shadow under the pine cone. So I'm just coming on the tip of my brush along the background there. A little bit of shadow. And it's up to you for berries. You can add some berries into this as well. There are some lovely red berries dotted around. So again, I would mix my red with my magenta and a touch of yellow. And just spot in nice and creamy with your paint, really strong for your berries. And just pop them where you want them. A few bunches of berries. Literally just touching down with the tip of my brush to create a bit more colour in that background. Now for this, at this stage you want lots of pigment, not so much water, so that the colour can stand up against the colours that are already on the paper. We just put in a few speckles, just touch down and lift off. You're creating tiny little beads of colour. I'm going to add some yellow over the top. I'm going to add some yellow over the top of some of them. Give them more of an orangey colour. I'm just going to let that happen on the paper all by itself. Fabulous. So we've got our background, we've got our foreground, we've got our foliage going on. So now's the time for the lantern and of course our salt. I'm just going to clean out my palette because even with my big new palette I've made a big mess. Now there are options with the berries. If you wanted to go into more detail with this whole painting, you could use masking fluid to mask off the berries. They would be left as little white dots. You'd take your masking fluid off when you'd finished your foliage and you'd go back in with your red and paint over the top. Personally, I prefer this looser way of creating them, but if you want to try that at some point, then that's another way you could go. Okay, lantern. I'm going to take my grey and some water. Quite a lot of water again. We're going to start light. Okay, let me remind you, if you don't have grey, I want you to mix blue, more blue than red to make a purple. Make your purple and then add a touch of yellow. Not too much, a little bit at a time. Touch more red in there. And you'll get your grey. You get a lovely dark grey. There we go. So bluey purple, touch of yellow, grey. But water it down for our first layer. And remember, we've got some light coming in and hitting and a sprinkling of snow over the left hand side and the top of our lantern. So we're going to start wet on to dry, really light grey. That's too strong. You can go over the handle. I do still want a hint of colour. I don't want it to be white. So grey, wet on to dry. Then I'm just coming in with some water. Spreading that out all over the lantern. Remember, your watercolours always dry back lighter than when you put them on as well. Then we're going to come down the middle. And along the bottom. And finally, down the left-hand side, nice and slowly down there. Use your fingers for balance. Okay. I'm just going to lift a little bit of colour out on the left with my tissue. And on the top. So I want a stain of colour on the lantern, but I don't want it too dark and I don't want it too light. So now we've got that lighter area, we're going to build up the intensity of our grey. Now I'm going to do a little bit at a time, I think. We'll do the top part first. So I'm going to go again, this time starting on the dark side. Coming down the right hand side. And then start coming across the other side. Wet into wet now. Just letting this paint bleed together. I'm going to come in a bit stronger again. Just touching down with my brush on the right, far right hand side. Now here, the paper's dried on me. So what I'm going to do is come along this edge with some water and soften that line. I don't want an edge, I don't want a sharpness in the middle of that painting. We're going to add the salt in a minute, so keep up with me. Then I'm going to come across the top of the windows, the panes of glass. And just come under the lip. Taking my time, I'll go a bit quiet here when I'm concentrating on that actual shape there, the top of the lantern. Much darker there, and we've still got that faded light bit on the top. We've still got a little bit of time. I'm waiting for the paint to start drying a little bit on me. So I'm going to come up again with my grey along the right hand side and across this knobbly ridge. Now it's dried up here already today. I can see the paper's dry, so I shall add some water again in this dry section, creep up onto the dark grey so that it gradually it picks up that paint and gives it somewhere to go, and then drop some more dark grey in. And we come across. Because this is sloped, the snow hasn't sat on the surface of this top part, so it's much darker here, as you can see in the reference picture. Now let's put some salt on. Grab a pinch of salt, and I'm just going to sprinkle that into the wet paint. This is going to give us texture. Not too much, just a sprinkling. I want this lantern to look rusty. I'm just going to finish off the top here. Just bring a few little specks of this grey, peeking through the top of the lantern where the snow's sitting on the top. And a little bit of water. Touch of grey, a little bit of water. And some more salt. I'm just going to touch down with my tissue. I've gone a little bit too dark there. There we go. It's fine in the scheme of things. Okay, so we've got this lovely light speckling going on this side. And I'm just going to put a few more. It's dry now. Pretty much dry. Couple of little tiny flecks of this grey blue over the white snowy area, just so that we've got a hint of the metalwork showing through the snowflakes. Isn't it lovely? I really like this one. Okay, grey again. Now we can go nice and strong here, straight down the bars. Nice steady hand. Use the point of your brush and push through as you come down. Line it up, push through the brush as you come down. Just dot it amongst the foliage. And the next one. Touch down, pull through. Luckily, the width of the brush when I push down is about the right width for the metalwork between the glass. That's lucky, isn't it? And then I'm going to bring some of this darker grey along the bottom as well. Just miss a couple of spots where you want some foliage to be coming over the top. And then down the left side. Up on the tip of the brush. Rest your fingers on your page for balance. Down we come towards the bauble. Okay, I don't want any lines here where these bars meet the top, so I'm just going to go back across the top and blend that in. There we go, isn't that lovely? And if you look really closely inside the lantern, you've got some bars going across the floor there. I'm going to soften that line, okay. So let me talk to you about the bars on the other side of the lantern. I want you to take your grey, you're going to do a thinner line, and we're going to break that line up, okay. So we're going to come down, tip of the brush, leave some gaps as we come down. Do the other one as well. You can break the line. And then what I want you to do is to take just some clean water on your brush and come right down beside that grey. Smoothing, giving that paint somewhere to go. Remember, we're softening our marks with a little bit of water beside those marks. Oops, I've gone into the top of the candle. There we go. I'm using normal salt, but you can use coarse salt, Alessandra. Okay, once you've gone down with those bars, I'm kind of wishing I'd done them in brown now, but it's too late. I'm just going to touch down with my tissue and lift them back out again. Soften them. We shouldn't see them too strong. The ones close to us are strong, the ones in the background. In fact, I'm going to go in with a touch of burnt sienna because it's upsetting me. And I'm going to go back into those bars and do them again. Bit of burnt sienna. Touch of water to fade them back a bit. That's better. And then a dab with the tissue. That's better. Okay. There's a few little things going on the ground around the candle. So I'm going into my grey. And I'm just going to create some shapes on there. It's reflections, I think, from the foliage. I'm literally just bouncing my brush around to make some interesting shapes in the bottom there. And before the paint dries too much, I'm going to add some salt to my lantern. Fabulous, we're nearly done. I think we've done remarkably. All you've got left is the handle. Now, if you want to, guys, you could put that in with a fine liner pen. I'm just going to use my size 6 brush. Just going to come into that handle. Balance your little finger against the paper. Come round. And back up the other side. There's our handle. Now, my paint was still wet under here, so it's bled a little bit. That's okay. It's fine. Okay, I'm going to dry this off with a hairdryer. We're nearly done. Off we go. Dry it off. And just to finish off, I'm going to add a little bit more definition before I take the salt away. I'm going to reshape this side, take it a bit darker. With my grey, I'm going to come under this ridge again. Remember, watercolour always dries lighter. Coming across that middle section. Touch of water, allow that to spread out. The salt's still on here, so the salt's still going to work. And then coming down, just darken it, make it a bit richer, a bit stronger, really making sense of that shape there under the edge of the lantern. And then again, I'm going to come back up this side, darken it down, pour some paint across. I can feel the salt under my brush. And then just water in that middle section. Nice and dark. And what I'll do, once this is dried, I'll put that handle in again. Yeah, so other than a little bit of tidying up of straight lines, I think we have created our Christmas lantern. Interesting one to do, lots of techniques to practice. And for a final flurry, I'm not keen on this side, behind the lantern, behind the pine cone, so I'm going to add a bit more dark there, a bit more shadow going on. A little bit of dry brushing. And I would say that's not a bad job. One last thing, guys. Oh, well done, Paula. Enjoy painting it again. Watch now, we'll paint later. Now I've figured out how to get into the class. Fabulous. All I'm going to finish off with is darkening under the candle, that little candle holder, the tea light holder. Just think that needed a little bit more colour behind it and in front of it, just to make that stand out. But other than that, I think a great success. I hope you have had fun painting yours. Let me come back to camera before I disappear. Oops, there we go. So I hope you've enjoyed painting your Christmas lanterns. Please share your posts. Now obviously once this is dry, I want you to dust that salt off. Best to let it dry naturally, okay? Let it dry back naturally. Just take a soft brush and dust the salt off and see the pattern that you're left with, okay? I'm not going to rush it with the hairdryer now because the salt will just blow away and it won't have time to naturally absorb the paint and give that pitted finish to the lantern. So let your salt dry naturally. Don't rush it. Brush it off with a soft brush. Take a picture and post it on our Watercolour Wednesday group. Thank you so much for being with me for Watercolour Wednesday. And I'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye for now. Bye.